Life is living itself. Satsang. Tulukut. Who even decided what a spiritual path is and why it's needed? Maybe the material world is more than enough. For me, the journey lasted about 18 years. Most of that time, there wasn't a living teacher guiding me. It was more like an experimental path, full of trials and errors. I tried many different things, many practices. If I had to sum it all up in one sentence, it would be this: there was simply a strong, inner longing. I didn't even know exactly what I was looking for. In the beginning, I would have probably called it a desire to explore the subtle or invisible world. Later, when I began reading the words of masters, I became vaguely aware of something called liberation. That's what mystics throughout time had been after, and that completely captivated me. All the other aspects, esoteric teachings, occult ideas, mystical literature, they gradually fell away. It was only this one theme that remained: liberation. Of course, I had my own idea of what that meant. I didn't truly know where I was going or who I really was, you see? And this is the biggest trap for a seeker: the meeting in the mind. You form an image of who you're supposed to become: liberated, enlightened. But because the personal self has never tasted the impersonal, never experienced true unity, it can only create a concept. And so, naturally, the seeker, operating from thought, starts chasing this image, trying to match it, trying to become like some teacher or enlightened figure they've read about or seen. There's a kind of mental copying, but it's not the real thing. This whole idea that you need to become something in order to be free, it's a misunderstanding. You have to look at it from a different angle. Who is this seeker? What is it really that's being sought? It's not an object, not a role or status. And it's definitely not something external. This path is an introversion, a turning inward, a leap into yourself. That's how it's always been. Enlightenment has never been found as something external. It's not an achievement. It's a seeing into the true nature of things. It's the crumbling of every identification you were conditioned with since childhood. Ideas like, "I am the body," or "someone lives inside this body." And that, in essence, was the whole journey. But once this was seen clearly, the entire path began to feel absurd. Because who was walking it? You see, the body can walk to the store or across the street. That's fine. But who was walking for 18 years? It was just a made-up character, a mental construct chasing an abstraction. And that's the funny part. It's actually quite humorous. All those efforts, spiritual practices, doing this and that, to somehow become something. Though it was never really clear what exactly one was trying to become. Still, there was this constant doing. A disciplined approach, every day with structure and rigor, meditating twice a day, practicing Qigong, reading spiritual masters. And yet, something just didn't click. But now it becomes clear. All of it was the effort of a character that never really existed. It was all happening on the level of thought. And this is the very reason why the spiritual search often drags on for 15, 20 years or more. It's because the whole thing is happening within the mind. That's the great irony of the spiritual path. Most of it unfolds as mental activity. People claim insights, states of consciousness, even spiritual achievements. Little medals they pin on themselves. Look how advanced I am. But in reality, nothing is really happening. It's just mind. That's all. What's needed is a complete shift in direction, a turning around. That's what's being offered, a turning inward. This is what Ramana and Nisargadatta pointed to with Jnana Yoga, with self-inquiry. It's not about outward expansion, it's about moving in the opposite direction, inward, deeper, into the core. At some point, a question stops you in your tracks. At what age did you first discover that you exist? It baffles the mind. You begin to see that the idea of I is not anchored in anything. It's not supported by anything real. It's just assumed. But no one really looks in that direction. The intellect is always turned outward. Constant expansion, objectification, objectification, objectification. Layer upon layer of concepts. The mind takes in everything it sees and hears and turns it into knowledge, into the known. That's what the mind is busy with. But when the mind turns inward, that is the true search. The one that can actually lead to awakening from all this mental fragmentation. Because all division exists only in the mind. There was never a real separation. Never. The same one power flows through everything that appears. The same source expresses itself in all forms. So, what's the core issue for a human being? It lies in a belief, taken for granted as a fact, that the observer resides within the body. That belief creates the illusion of a world out there, something separate. That's the original split, the idea that there's an observer and a thing being observed. But this is purely conceptual. Even the body is perceived like any other object, just another form, like furniture or the sky. But then, who is perceiving the body? Who is witnessing every single thing that arises? Sounds, phenomena, sensations, everything? That's where the gaze needs to turn. And it doesn't matter what you call it. Those are just words from books. The answer will come, maybe without words, but it will come. That answer is what mystics of all times have been seeking. And there's nothing mystical or paradoxical about it. There's no special being involved in it. It's the most natural thing. Consciousness simply moves toward its own source. And again, this is not the achievement of a character. Even the path itself can't be claimed. It's all impersonal consciousness. That's all there is. It moves toward its origin. That's all. It just happens. No one chooses it. There is no one to choose. The spark of search ignites, and it's no one's doing. It may begin with a question, a quiet interest that arises, pulling one away from the material world for a moment. A question like, what's the meaning of all this drama? What is this all about? What is it made of? What came before birth? What comes after? Are reincarnations real or just stories? What's really going on here? People who followed that kind of question were known in the East as Jnani, those who walk the path of knowledge. Others, known as karmi, went through the material world, through money, power, achievement. Not better, not worse, just different. But always, the core question remains. What is the source of all this? Where does it all come from? So, to put it simply, nothing is really chosen. The search simply ignites. Let's say it flashes into being, and that's it. And if it ignites well, it tends to torment you for a while. Just look at how many paths there are these days, how many strategies. This topic has never really been forbidden, but for a long time, people just weren't that interested. And now, so many traditions have opened up. There's a vast variety. Even the traditional religions, which at one time were rooted in a non-dual understanding, have gradually drifted away from that essence through various interpretations. But there are still non-dual teachings that carry this clarity, this deep impulse to turn inward and realize what has always been present. These teachings are shaped around the pursuit of non-duality. There are many different traditions: Sufism, Zen, Kashmir Shaivism, Nazism, and some schools of Buddhism that haven't been completely ritualized or turned into formal religion. Something alive still breathes in them. They are aimed at revealing one's true nature. Masters have always existed within all these traditions. Ask questions, any questions. In some traditions, understanding is connected with energetic processes. I'll explain why. For example, a seeker might go through practices where disidentification happens through powerful energetic shifts, like Kundalini rising, spontaneous flows of energy, Shaktipat, and many other energetic movements. You see? And that tradition would describe it that way. But in other traditions, there's no such term as Kundalini. That doesn't mean transformation isn't happening, just that it's framed differently. So, what is enlightenment, essentially? It's the loss of self-identification, that's all. It's the recognition that there is no separate I, no isolated self that began somewhere else. No I here and a world out there. Two separate things. You see? The idea of separation. The idea of I implies control. It implies the power of choice, the right to act freely. And that very idea of control, that is the root of suffering. Once that's gone, that's enlightenment. The realization that there's no one here to become enlightened. No individual unit, no person as such. And this doesn't concern the body. In other words, enlightenment isn't an X-ray. So those who are called enlightened aren't different from ordinary people, except in terms of the boundaries of the mind. And even those boundaries are only conceptual. What can truly limit consciousness? Just a game. Individuality. The belief, I am the body. That's the root. The body becomes the boundary. But it's all conceptual. Once that belief falls away, everything else starts to crumble. Like the samskaras they speak of in the East. Mental impressions, tendencies, emotions and thoughts stop being claimed. There's a realization that thought is a completely spontaneous process. Just the clatter of the mortal mouth, the creation of sounds. But behind it, no one is there. Consciousness is speaking, always listening. Consciousness talking to itself. Because at both ends of the stick, there's no one. When you truly recognize this for yourself, you begin to see. There is only one space, one awareness. The one that speaks, the one that listens. It's all the same. And it's just happening. Vedanta puts it beautifully. God walks alone, talking to himself about himself, because there is no one else and nothing else. Everything is God. That's the short explanation. Now, what kinds of transformations can occur? If you read about Krishnamurti, he describes them vividly. His were so intense they manifested in the body. There were physical signs at the level of the chakras and beyond. I haven't come across any other teacher who went through such extreme metamorphoses. Krishnamurti described it all. Disappearances, electric shocks, total loss of memory. He had to relearn the taste of juice, the names of colors. That's how deep the transformation was. You know, some people who engage in energetic practices often link their experiences to Kundalini. That's one way to frame it, in one particular tradition, but in others, it's described differently. Even within yoga or Tibetan teachings, it varies. It all depends on the tradition. And these are all conceptual, symbolic frameworks. They're meant to offer some kind of foundation, a reference point for learning. But in truth, they're just crutches, something to eventually be discarded. That's why I wouldn't recommend clinging to any rigid structure, like saying, there are exactly this many chakras, or insisting there must be a Kundalini awakening. Some people get caught up because they read somewhere that Kundalini has to rise for realization to occur. So they wait for that, expecting something specific. And then there's a simple one, like the story about the Buddha who said, "Nothing happened under the Bodhi tree." It's like the whole chain of events just came to a stop. A clear seeing that all of it, everything that happens, is simply occurring in the mind. So, what paths are there, really? In the end, it's the collapse of all events. You see? It's all mental. Mental. What people try to describe is actually this endless current of perception. But the mind, it wants to catalog everything. It describes and describes, endlessly trying to define what can't be captured.